take cameras off, please, if you're not presenting. So please, cameras off. I can see a number of cameras. If you could just take those, that'd be great. Okay, so that covers all the housekeeping points. We'll now commence recording. I think we've got one camera on. Can we just take that camera off, please? And we'll commence recording the meeting. So, as noted today, we're launching our economic growth strategy. This covers the period from 2021 to 2030, and it sets out our ambitions, objectives, and the priorities for Leicester and Leicestershire region for the next 10 years. We'll hear later from Dr. Glenn Athey, Principal Consultant from Cambridge Econometrics, who's been instrumental in the development of our vision for the future. I'm also delighted to welcome my fellow board members, Sonia Bagent and Andy Reid, OBE, who alongside myself, Mandeep Ray, CEO of the LLEP, and Sue Tilley, Head of Business and Innovation within the LLEP, will be taking part in the Q&A session following the presentation from Glenn. I think we may have some microphones on. If you could please mute the microphones. Please put your questions onto the chat as the meeting progresses, and obviously we will address as many of them as we can in the next session. Could I have the next slide, please? So the economic growth strategy. I'll begin by providing a short introduction outlining the purpose of the economic growth strategy. As we know, Leicester and Leicestershire has undergone a real transformation over the past decade into an innovative, technology-led and knowledge-based economy. These new and evolving structures, alongside our established strengths and advantages, will help us to overcome the impacts of COVID-19 and the ongoing challenges of the EU transition. It's important to also acknowledge the need to deliver economic participation and prosperity for all our residents, to improve people's health and to ensure a carbon neutral future. From post-COVID recovery to the future impact of new technologies and international trading arrangements, the future is uncertain. Important national policy decisions that will impact local economies are also being formulated as we speak, and we will know their priorities, objectives, and potential resources next year. Prior to the formulation and writing of this strategy, a separate document entitled the Leicester and Leicestershire Economic Growth Strategy Evidence Review 2021 was published. It set out the insights and evidence from existing strategies and studies, from stakeholder workshops and research commissioned by the LLEP to offer an up-to-date analysis and outlook for the local economy. It also incorporates the recommendations and the priorities of the Strategic Growth Plan for Leicester and Leicestershire 2050. Our Vision for Growth 2018, the Strategic Growth Plan for the region, which has been endorsed by the 9 local authority partners and the Leicester and Leicestershire Local Enterprise Partnership. Furthermore, this strategy considers the climate emergency declarations made by both Leicester City Council and Leicestershire County Council, and highlights a vision for achieving sustainable economic growth. Could I have the next slide, please? Despite the current economic and policy uncertainties, we are best served by identifying and being informed about our main challenges and opportunities. As noted, the strategy sets out ambitions, objectives and priorities for the next 10 years and is intended to be used as a commissioning document for seeking funding, allocating funding and making decisions of what to prioritise over that period. Using our local capabilities, innovations and skills, we will build a productive, innovative, inclusive and sustainable economy at the cutting edge of science and technology that supports the health of the people and the planet. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Glenn Athey from Cambridge Econometrics, who will provide further insight into the development process that has been adopted in building up the strategy. Over to you, Glenn.
Many thanks, Kevin. Yeah, if you just bring up my first slide, please. My name's Glenn Appy. I work for a consultancy called Cambridge Econometrics, and we were asked to help develop the economic strategy at the beginning of this year, really, and we started in January. Do you want to go to the next slide, please? Next one after that. Great. Yeah, so I just want to, I'll give you a bit of background about, what we were asked to do and how we went about it. And it tells a bit of a story on how this strategy was developed and how it kind of ended up in the format it did. And it's quite an interesting story about Leicester and Leicestershire. So, an economic strategy always fulfills several roles, really. It's a vehicle for expressing the needs and ambitions of your region and of your stakeholders and partners. It's there to put on a platform some leadership for the economy and some shared vision. And it also tries to spell out how some of the big issues are going to be addressed. I think what was different this time, if you press the button, something should pop up, is that the future direction of policy and economic recovery after COVID is very uncertain. And we've heard about levelling up policy and the debate that's currently going on, but we're not very clear what's going to be in the white paper. So the challenge was to design a strategy which could offer ambitions, leadership, address some big issues, but be agile enough to deal with a changing policy environment. Next slide, please. So we followed the process. It was fairly comprehensive. We based it on work done to date, and because there's been a lot of strategies and a lot of good work done already, whether it's on very distinct areas such as innovation or skills or careers. So we built on that. We made a lot of effort to get input from stakeholders. We did 16 online workshops. There were about 120 participants. We discussed this in 3 board meetings, and there was a public consultation session for 5 weeks. And we used a lot of evidence of the economy, of statistics and analysis. And we did look at case studies to look at what progress had been made in key initiatives. And this was really helpful just to demonstrate what was going on in your region. Next slide, please. And of course, we had to take into account COVID-19, and we researched the impact of COVID in Leicester and Leicestershire, and we found, there's a lot of detail in the reports associated with the strategy. There was higher caseloads in Leicester and Leicestershire. It's made inequalities worse. COVID-19, 117,000 jobs were classed as vulnerable. Were in things like hospitality, the visitor economy. Although redundancies weren't happening at the same pace as nationally. And we thought that, there could be up to something like 1,600 fewer jobs by 2030 with lower turnover and output. And, that is something that many regions are dealing with. So we thought it was worth putting that into context and trying to understand how we should respond with the economic strategy. Next slide, please. And this just illustrates we did think about Brexit as well, in terms of the potential impacts. That there's a need to strike new trade relationships. There are new supply chain challenges. There's issues about labour availability, and where inward investment will be coming from, and will this lead to some economic restructuring? So attempt to have a strategy which can deal with some of those issues, which we probably will see emerging with the transition to a new economic model. Next slide, please. And so we developed this framework for an economic growth strategy with 4 pillars, each with 4 priorities. The pillars are productive, which is most about entrepreneurship, about attracting international visitors and business, about developing jobs and skills for growth, and developing world-class business locations. And innovative, which is about innovation leadership, but also to broaden out innovation activity in the business space. So a broader range of businesses innovate and benefit from innovation, increase their productivity and profits and employment. Help push for the pioneering innovation and R&D that takes place in Leicester and Leicestershire's universities, these technology companies, and also sustainability, addressing the sustainability challenge through innovation. And the third pillar was inclusive, which is about creating a resilient workforce where all residents have access to skills and career progression and are paid the living wage. And finally, and importantly, sustainable was pillar 4. There was a lot of opinion that we needed to make a bold statement about sustainability and push forward progress in this area. So I'm just going to talk about each pillar in turn very briefly. If you go on the next slide, please, which is more about the underlying evidence behind it. And pillar 1 is productive. And we found the economy of Leicester and Leicestershire was performing well up to the pandemic. Unemployment was low, but productivity and productivity growth was also low, and the need to progress that. And we found that manufacturing is still very strong in Leicester and Leicestershire, and creates some very skilled jobs and contributes strongly to the economy. And managerial and professional jobs were increasing also. And also a growing population in Leicester and Leicestershire, so a need to continue to develop the economy and provide jobs in the future. Next slide, please. I think innovation was a strong pillar in terms of the progress, the visible progress made in Leicester and Leicestershire over the past 10 years, whether it's technology parks or knowledge-based or science-based jobs, technology, entrepreneurs and businesses, and the 3 universities all really getting stuck in with activities and initiatives that are really benefiting the local economy and really playing a role in developing the local economy. And so the priorities were innovation leadership, to broaden out innovation activity amongst businesses, to push pioneering innovation continually, and to also to help with sustainability and climate change. The next slide, please. And the third pillar was inclusion. I think we found that inequality, is a feature of Leicester and Leicestershire's economy, particularly COVID-19 has starkly illustrated that. There's some facts on the slide that low earners have shouldered a disproportionate share of the economic fallout from COVID-19, 7 times more likely to work in a vulnerable industry. And we see young people being impacted by COVID-19 and Black and ethnic minority residents at greater health risk and greater economic risk. So inequality is an inclusive economy is a key pillar, and the main priorities are to help inform qualifications and career choices amongst young people, improve skills, qualifications, employability of residents, improve access to work and help people improve their job quality and progress in employment. And the final pillar on the next slide, please, is sustainable. We reviewed a lot of the existing progress made on climate emergencies and strategies, and there's a renewable energy study and a natural capital plan. And, they very clearly lay out the challenges. They're all there in existing, papers from council meetings about the poor, public transport use in decline, population growth forecast, the need for sustainable solutions to future growth and development. And so this pillar is really about, we need to push forward transport sustainability, progress and proposals, push forward digital solutions, because that helps reduce journeys, and also look at where we may be able to engage in more renewable activity, renewable energy activity. There has been progress, but I think we needed to make a bold statement. Next slide, please. Wrapping up in the last few minutes, I think what struck me as a newcomer, I suppose, to Leicester and Leicestershire in terms of getting really involved in in the economy and understanding it in depth was I was really quite, taken aback, astounded by the progress made in the past 10 years in terms of especially things like technology parks, skilled jobs, the universities playing a role, sports science and sports related industries and activities. I thought there were some real unique strengths and some really unique, still powerful stories which build on historic strengths of Leicester and Leicestershire. But I found them really exciting because I thought they're really forward-looking, some of these developments, and they really help to tell a story about your region, which I think is unique and very, very positive going forward. And another powerful characteristic, if we go on the next slide, was I thought that conducting all these workshops with partners, they were really incredibly constructive. People and organisations contributed ideas, and they were fizzing with energy and commitment, and they all really communicated well together. And I thought, there's a strong basis for future partnership working, and this is really strong. Other localities don't all have this commitment, vision, and team working. So I think that's very strong, and to go forward. And I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. And so just to conclude, the strategy we delivered, I think, was structured and clear, that we know what the ambitions are and the pillars and the challenges, and can be used whatever comes next in government policy. It's uncertain times, but we've got clear ambitions and goals. And also the strategy develops our unique strengths and our track record in Leicester and Leicestershire. It says we're ambitious, we can deliver. We have already delivered a step change in the past 10 years, and we want to deliver a positive change in the next 10 years. So here's our prospectus for sustainable inclusive growth. And that's it from me. It's been a pleasure to help with the strategy. I've learned a lot, and I've worked and spoken to some great people in Leicester and Leicestershire. So thank you for your contributions.
Thank you, Glenn, for that overview of the process. And thanks to Glenn and his team at Cambridge Econometrics for all the hard work in pulling the strategy together. As I'm sure you can appreciate, given the uncertainty and the situations we have in our economy, not only local but national and international, then building a strategy like this is very difficult with those uncertainties around. And we're not saying that it's providing all of the answers, but certainly what it's giving us is a framework there to work to ensure that we have some clear objectives in moving forward as and when things become clearer, not only from national government, but in the wider economy. I'd like to also extend thanks to all of the partners who've participated in the process of developing the strategy, whether it was taking part in the workshops held, submitting feedback through the consultation process. That input has been invaluable. It's allowed us to ensure the strategy is reflective as far as possible of our very diverse region. So now I'd like to just move on to give you an opportunity to to raise some questions and for us to have discussions. Let's move on to the Q&A session. We've put a panel together that includes LEP representatives, both at board level and those officials working within the LEP team itself. So hopefully we will be able to cover as many of the points as possible. I can't promise we'll be able to answer everything, but any questions that we aren't able to cover off today, then we will do our best to respond to post the event. Continue to post the questions into the chat. We will of course be limited by time. We're looking to close up by 9:30 latest today, but that gives us a fair amount of time now to run through some key areas. And as I say, if we do run out of time, then we will try and cover those points off after the event. So the panel includes myself as chair, and as I said, non-exec board directors Sonia Bajent and Andy Reid OBE, and also we have Mandip Ray, CEO of the LEP, and Sue Tilley as officials of the LEP, who hopefully will be able to answer and give as many of the responses as we can. So Could I just get the first sort of question coming to the board from you,
Thanks,
Irshad?
Kevin. Yep, thanks, Kevin. The first question is around skills, and it has been addressed to an extent in the chat already, but I thought it'd be good to get the thoughts of the panel anyway. So the question is, how does the strategy address some of the skills challenges within our region?
Okay, I'm happy to pick up on that one initially, and maybe Mandip, you'd want to come in as well then, because I know you've been heavily involved in this area. But yeah, skills and skills gaps. I think for as long as I've been involved in the LEP, we've identified that one of the key issues that we need to try and address is skills. I think that's relevant at a national level, but certainly within Leicester and Leicestershire, we do have some major skills gaps that have been identified. We have done a local skills report that the LEP prepared, which can be accessed, and also looking at certain sectors that we always have seen as key ones to grow forward and where those gaps exist. So there's a lot of skills work that's been undertaken. In terms of detail, Mandip, do you want to just come in and outline some of the key areas we've looked at and focused on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. So alongside the strategy, we've developed 15 sector profiles which forecast the number of jobs going to be created and the impact on growth on those particular sectors. So at this moment in time, all we can do is gather the evidence base, and that's what our skills advisory panel do. We've refreshed the local skills report. Obviously, we don't have control over skills budgets, but what we have picked up is that the colleges are finding that resource really helpful in designing their curriculum and working closely with the business community. So it's very much about evidence gathering and making sure that we continue to monitor the impact on the local economy, particularly around skills. But the sector profiles have been well received. That's something that certainly the colleges will be using, and we'll be refreshing those on an annual basis.
Thank you, Mandip. And I think just to reinforce one point there, as somebody working in the private sector myself, and obviously a high proportion of our board are private sector representatives, we totally appreciate the need to close the gaps between business and education. That's not just in our locality, that's obviously at a national level. This is an area that I think has needed addressing for some time. And what we're trying to do is do everything we can to try and bring the key stakeholders in that process together at a local level, so that business can determine the needs it has and industries and sectors moving forward, and that therefore the education establishments have a clarity around what those business needs are and can design their curriculums around that. And that's obviously the way forward. It sounds common sense, but most of these things are. But that's what we're trying to do, albeit we don't have full control of all of the budgets and the resources available. Next question, please, Irshad.
Thank you, Kevin. So moving on to the themes around inclusivity and productivity, there's a question here asking whether there is an appetite within the Midlands region for a good work charter, as has been seen in other areas.
Yeah, good question. Sue, is this one that you'd like to come in on? Because I know this is an area you've been working with certain parts of our economy. What's your thoughts around this?
Thank you, Kevin. Well, obviously the principles of the Good Work Charter are really, really fundamental, but we've really addressed it. We've introduced our innovation board recently, and we bring together key stakeholders to actually look at the economy and how we can actually drive change and bring about strengthening those good practices we already have in the area, to move things forward. So that's a real key activity that we're looking at.
Thanks, Sue. And I think one thing I would say is that I firmly do believe that we need to ensure that where procurement is taking place at certain levels, that the businesses that are involved in that process are at the highest standards. And I know one of my fellow board directors, Andy Reid. Andy, I know you're very clear on this subject as well.
Yeah, just if you look at the 10 principles of the Good Work Charter, some of that they're all trying to be sort of woven into the strategy. You'll pick up on stuff on well-being, learning, and participation and support. So perhaps we could be a little bit more explicit, and it does tie to some of the other questions that people have asked about probably tackling some of that poverty and inequality still in some areas, and hence the strategy is trying to address, you know, where we've tried for 20 or 30 years I've been involved in economic development, but you know, some of that still lags, productivity, etc. But Good Work Charter really fits into many of the themes here. But yeah, perhaps we just sort of need to shout it out a little bit more, bring it to the fore a little bit.
Agreed, Andy. Yeah, fully agree with that. Next question, Urshad.
Thanks. And linked to that point around productivity and inclusivity, there's a question here that speaks about how poverty is high within the Leicester City region, with many people and neighbourhoods feeling left behind. The question is, how will this strategy aim to address these long-standing issues around poverty and deprivation within the Leicester and Leicestershire region?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, very important topic area. I mean, we were, as a board, when we commissioned this report, we were very keen to understand how our economic growth could be as inclusive as possible. Well aware that there are, you know, sections of our local economy that are in, you know, very difficult positions, and I think the pandemic has made that even worse for many people. What we're trying to do is to ensure that we create an environment which offers opportunities to everybody. And that certainly means focusing on some of those areas where there's been less opportunity in the past. So, you know, there'll be a detail will come behind this document, as we say, because this is not providing all the detail. This is the more strategic pillars at this stage. But certainly, if we're going to move forward as an economy and a local economy sensibly, we need to ensure that we do this on as fair as level as possible and as inclusive. And that is why it is a central pillar there. Mandip, did you want to come back in with some specific points around that?
Yeah, I mean, we're acutely aware of the deep-rooted issues in this city, and the evidence review demonstrated that. As Kevin said, this is a framework for future intervention. And so what we will be doing is looking at translating each of those pillars into action plans. But we will need to understand the future funding landscape, and particularly the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is specifically targeted to address inequalities in the city. So as you say, it's a framework. We've recognised the importance of inclusivity, and the next stage of the process is to develop kind of investment plans, but we'll need to understand the funding landscape before we can do that.
Yeah, and I think just to reinforce that point, you know, when we set about putting this growth strategy together, we did anticipate and expect by then to have much more clarity from central government around comprehensive spending review, the levelling up fund, and as many of you will know, information from government has been relatively scant and quite scarce in this regard. And as we sit here now, we don't really have anything like the degree of detail and the impact that that we in Leicester and Leicestershire will be able to generate from the resources available, which is you know, a little bit irritating in some ways, because I think we would wanted to put this strategy forward with some clarity around where the funding streams will come from, but we're not in that position, unfortunately. As soon as we are, then we will be able to take the central pillars that we've identified and work those up into clear action plans with the funding streams behind that. But we thought it was important to put this out into the wider public arena at this stage, so that we can see, you know, the general feeling and get comments back as soon as possible. Next question, please, Urshad.
Thank you, Kevin. The next question relates to some of our green ambitions. So the question is, how does the strategy align with local climate emergency declarations? And also, how does it align with the government's 10-point plan for a green recovery?
Okay, yep, really important question again. Mandip, do you want to pick that one up initially?
Yeah, so we've been working with the Midlands Engine on the 10-point plan that the Midlands Engine has prepared, and that's been aligned to the government strategy. So we've basically made sure that we tick the right boxes with government, and our strategy is completely aligned to both the city and county council's climate strategies.
Yeah, and as somebody who sits on the board of the Engine myself, and very close to that, one of the objectives that we've had throughout the pandemic in particular, but certainly the last couple of years, is to ensure that we have an aligned strategy with the Engine, but also with the LEPs in our surrounding area. So there's been a lot of work that's been ongoing with D2N2 LEP and with Greater Lincolnshire LEP as these Midlands LEPs, to ensure that we are presenting a joined up framework that isn't just pure geography of Leicester and Leicestershire. A lot of our plans in this area are involved with other LEPs and other territories and geographies, but it is important, as Mandip said, that we're very much aligned with pan-regional organisations such as the Engine, and I think we're probably more aligned now than we've ever been, because that's the frameworks through which government will look to deliver funding and projects. So hopefully, we are more aligned and more in sync with what's going on in this area. But it's a fundamental area. You see lots and lots of stuff in the press with opportunities around green growth. We'd like Leicester and Leicestershire to be right at the heart of that. And I think we've got some really exciting projects, if you look around the geography, that reinforce the work that we're doing there at the moment. Would any of my panel members like to come in on this point any further? Andy, maybe?
Yeah, sorry, Kevin. Yeah, just wanted to re-emphasise that really. It is at the heart of, as I say, this is a strategy that sets out how we work with partners, both upwards and obviously sort of locally. And clearly this whole area is one where we've set some ambitious targets for ourselves as a county. And from an investment panel point of view, we started really ensuring that everything that we do fits this strategy already. So we can only do what we can do as a LEP. That this whole purpose, and just looking at the sort of the questions that are in here, just to re-emphasise, this is a strategy that enables us all as a county to work together with a common goal. We can't deliver much of this specifically ourselves. It is really down to the partners that are in this room, virtual room, this morning. And on this particular question, it requires all of us to take our micro actions as well as the strategic direction we're taking with some of the investment we've done at MIRA recently, and obviously some of the things that we're working with both and all of the local authorities in our area. So this is where the partnership sort of piece really comes in, because we certainly can't do it all on our own, but we will work with everybody who's committed to this in the same ways that we are.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, Andy, is to just reinforce, where the LEP's role is in this. The LEP, by its function and core principle, is there to ensure engagement and bring together the key stakeholders and the partnerships that can make these things happen. And the LEP, given its relatively scant resource and structures, is not the vehicle that will be able to deliver all of this. The LEP is the vehicle that ensures that we have the agenda correct and that all of the key people who can play a part are working together to a common goal. And that's where we need to look at the central role that the LEP has played and continues to play, regardless of the uncertainty around what that future may involve. We will continue to sit in the centre of things to try and orchestrate, collaborative working in partnership to achieve the core objectives. Once we understand the funding streams and the support that government can put into the region in whatever form, then clearly we can start working up the specific initiatives to help deliver that. But I think it's important that people are fully aware of where the LEP's role is, and to be honest, what the extent is of what the LEP can actually do in this. We're there to set that agenda and to get that agenda agreed, and then to help it move forward. But it involves everybody playing that part in a sort of proper partnership arrangement.
Yeah.
Osad, next topic, please.
Thank you, Kevin. The next question relates to some of our key sectors within the Leicester and Leicestershire region. So the question asks, how does the strategy work to promote the merits of key growth sectors such as logistics and tourism in Leicester and Leicestershire?
Yeah, I'll look at that first. I mean, I think one of the key things, if we sort of just backtrack slightly, probably about 2.5 years now, many of you will remember that we embarked under government's instructions to develop what at that time was the local industrial strategy, which government requested. So we spent a significant amount of time then pulling together a local industrial strategy at that time, which identified those key sectors and areas that Leicester and Leicestershire had a degree of established experience in, but could really then be the springboards for economic growth and development moving forward. Now, despite the fact that the local industrial strategies were never formally adopted by government, there are rumours that many of those may sort of re-emerge at some point under whatever heading that would be. In this LEP in particular, our direction as a board and as an organisation has been to continue to pursue those key sectors and key areas and not wait for government to give sign-off. Where possible and where funding was available, we've continued to move those initiatives forward. So if we look at the sectors that we identified 2.5, 3 years ago, many of you will have seen developments that have taken place at Space Park, at Sport Park in Loughborough, through our enterprise zones, which are incredibly successful, and obviously our development of the plan for the Freeport bid. We've just continued to carry on in the areas that we considered, via the previous research, were the ones we should continue to invest in. And that will not change, because they are exactly the ones now that we're identifying can underpin the 4 pillars that we've just identified in the recent strategy document. So we've just carried on getting on with it, and we haven't really sort of allowed the delays and the issues that have been floating around at national government level to stop us doing that. But there are obviously some key sectors and key areas that we would love to develop further. The difficulty with putting this kind of plan together is, to all intents and purposes, whatever sector and part of the economy people work in, people will feel that is the one that needs to be invested in to grow. We have to look at the evidence and the research behind that to identify how many of those we can sensibly support, because we can't do everything. Mandip, can I hand over to you at that point, because I know you...
Yeah, sure. I'd refer back to the sector profiles. As you mentioned, Kevin, this strategy hasn't departed from the list that was developed. The ambition around those key technology sectors remains, but I think we recognise that we've got large volume employing sectors like social care, health, logistics that also need support. So that's why we've developed these 15 sector plans. So I would urge colleagues to review those plans. But as Kevin says, we can't include every single sector in the strategy, but we've really set out why Leicester and Leicester has been quite resilient, because we're not overly reliant on one particular sector, and that's a positive. So, as I say, I'd refer to the sector plans.
Yeah, and I think one thing to point out, and I'd probably ask Sonia and Sue to come in at this point, is that one of the things we're all aware of in terms of our local economy is that it is an SME-based economy. The vast majority of the businesses in our region are SMEs, and many of them at the S end of the SME. And we need to ensure, therefore, that those businesses at a micro level have the support structures in place for them, which is obviously where the LEP's Growth Hub and Business Support has continued to be, really strong and useful. Sonia, Sue, anything you'd like to add at that point?
Shall I go first, Sonia?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. Our SMEs are the backbone of our economy. They really have proved how resilient they've been through the pandemic. They continue to pivot and innovate within their businesses. So we have done our very best to support them through the Business Gateway Growth Hub. We've got a number of interventions that we've put in place. There's different webinars they can attend to help them to find out the latest information and adapt and change as they've had to do through this pandemic. They really are the backbone of our economy.
Thanks, Sue. Maybe I can come in on that, Kevin. There is an excellent question in the chat as well regarding sort of the role of micro businesses and SMEs. So I'll sort of try and cover both. But I'd agree with Sue, you know, the work that's been done to date is excellent on trying to link micro businesses and SMEs with our aspirational sectors. And it's played such a crucial part that it's formed a massive part of this strategy and was a huge part of what we were looking at of how we can link them. We have such a high proportion of micro businesses and SMEs. We recognise both the challenges and the opportunities that that presents to us. The Growth Hub has already been instrumental in providing support. You know, a couple of the examples are going to be in there regarding some carbon programs we've got where we're involving micro businesses to help them individually improve their carbon footprint. And that's key when we're linking such big topics to small businesses and helping them understand how they can make changes within their small businesses. And particularly innovation. We've done some really good work around the innovation of trying to help them understand how that can impact their businesses as well. So we're already onto it as much as we can be, and this strategy sets out some great opportunities for us to exploit that even further. So we want to make it aspirational, and all the great sectors and great work we're already doing, make it aspirational and not intimidating for those businesses.
Yeah, and I think one of the points to put in there is clearly, you know, there's enormous amount of support that the Growth Hub has provided to businesses, you know, right back since the start of the pandemic, and it's been great to see, you know, how that's worked through. You know, without that Growth Hub, I'm not sure how many of those businesses would have been able to access the levels of support they needed. Clearly, one of the things we need to also be considerate of is access to finance for SMEs moving forward. And you know, the financial structures have changed very significantly in the last 18 months, 2 years. I know we have people on the call who work alongside me through the engine with things like the Midlands Engine Investment Fund, which is there to support debt and equity lending into SMEs to provide that level of support. And I think, you know, that's going to be another interesting area we need to look at. You know, we don't suffer as a region by having very large corporates that tend to, you know, once they announce job losses, redundancies, has that massive impact on us. We're not hit by that as much as other areas are, but we are very heavily impacted by the fact that, you know, smaller SMEs can literally, you know, dissolve and not be there with very slight changes in the economy itself. So I think we've got to be very, very mindful of the level of support and keeping that support in place for SMEs to allow them to continue to be, as we said, that sort of main part and backbone of our local economy. Okay, just to move on.
Sorry, can I just come in on that as well? Particularly, there was some interesting feedback on the courses and the things through the Growth Hub that are being looked at. They're now no longer recovery focused. You know, we've provided some really great work to help them, SMEs, over the recovery period, but actually quite a lot of the inquiries and quite a lot of the interest is coming from areas such as finance, but also growth and innovation, and that's really, really positive to see that move in the right direction.
Absolutely. Ershad, next question, please.
Thank you, Kevin. An interesting question here posed in the chat. What would the panel like to see from MPs in London to help promote this plan and help it to achieve its aims and objectives?
Good question. I guess the first thing is a greater degree of certainty and understanding of what government plans are in some of the key areas which massively impact us. Most of the funding that the LEP has access to and has available comes from central government, obviously, and we therefore need to have some clarity around that. Clarity certainly around what part the government perceives LEPs can play in future development. We've seen 10 years of LEP involvement. I know the rest of the board and the team are very, very proud of what the LEP has achieved. So I think we need clarity. We need some more certainty. We need a greater understanding as to what government feels and does it support the fact that we see the growth for Leicester and Leicestershire in our region in this way, and we need to know that that is reinforced and supported by government. And we need to see, you know, much more collaborative working, certainly across various parts of government that ensure there's a joined up structure. It's very difficult and frustrating, as I know many people may be aware, trying to deal with government when you're doing it purely at department by department level. Most of the things we're talking about here are cross department, and they have implications across various parts of Whitehall and Westminster, as well as our own locale. So I think we need more joined up, more certainty, more clarity. Very happy to open that up to my other panel members to say what they'd like to see, but that's on my Christmas wish list, I guess.
Just to add, Kevin, that we do meet regularly with our MPs, and we do have good relationships with our MPs. So we will be urging them to share this document and be ambassadors for Leicester and Leicestershire, which they are in Whitehall. So that's all we can do. But yeah, we would certainly welcome the support of our MPs to promote this strategy.
Yeah, obviously, Kevin, I couldn't resist to jump in on this one as somebody who was an MP in Leicestershire for 15 years. So I wish we had something of this nature, a single point of call as a member of Parliament, and a document, and a sort of a strategic stakeholders all sort of speaking with one voice. It gives a powerful sort of voice to that, and hopefully in Westminster they're able, both in the corridors of power, working with ministers, as you say, across different departments. It gives a document in which it allows people to talk about those key sectors and some of the challenges that we face. So hopefully with them working together as well, I think there is not a lot of, we've taken the big P politics out of a document like this. It is one that would be shared across the parties for an ambition for Leicestershire. It just provides a powerful voice for them to do that, both in very public spaces within the House of Commons, but more importantly, as you say, Kevin, in the different departments with a common themed agenda. Lots of these things do fit into different government departments, and we just hope that the Levelling Up white paper, whenever it comes in the new year, recognises that in every sphere that I've ever worked, if we could just get a more joined up government approach to stuff, that would be my Christmas present too.
Yeah, and I think just to echo Mandip's point, certainly in the last couple of years, one of the areas that the LEP has tried to do successfully, in my view, is to create much stronger relationships with local MPs and also, politicians involved with city council, county council, district councils. But certainly our MP engagement is much, much higher than it has ever been. And I think what we have is a consistent approach now on documents such as this, and also other key areas that we can see that we're all joined up much better than we have been. So having that louder voice at Westminster is very, very important. And hopefully, therefore, we will be able to get much more evidence of this being heard in the corridors of power as we move forward, which can only support us to develop our plan. Okay, next point, please, Shep.
Thanks, Kevin. I think given the time, I think we may have space for one final question. I think it's something you've already touched on briefly, but the question is, how confident are the panel about the future role of LEPs following the imminent publication of the Levelling Up white paper?
I had a feeling that question might come in. Well, I'm sure you will all be aware, or many of you will be aware, that the government is involved in conducting a review of LEPs. As we sit here now, we do not have any certainty of what the outcome of that review will be. Lots and lots of rumours, lots and lots of speculation, but there's no point in working on rumour and speculation. We need to wait and see what the outcome of that is. I think there's a really, really important role that LEPs can continue to play. I think LEPs have, certainly in our area, delivered an enormous amount of growth, opportunity and economic value in the 10 years they've been here. You could say, well, you would say that, but as a private sector person who's been heavily involved, I can see the actual benefits. And going around our region, I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved at the various locations and parts of the communities that we've impacted. I don't know. Let's see where the review gets to. It would be great if there was a very joined up approach here that outlined the fact that all parts of our key community and society are much more linked up, and this has been thought through from Levelling Up in a holistic manner. Maybe that's hoping for a little too much, but if we got that, I think then we can actually start to put a much more inclusive framework around it, where we can explain how all parts of our society can benefit. But we need to wait and see. There's a lot of speculation and rumour and uncertainty, and obviously we just need to see where that develops to. happy for any of my panel members to come on board and say anything further there.
Again, I'm happy to. Sorry, Kevin, I was just waiting for if any of the others wanted to say anything. But given the fact that, you know, where we are, and we can't probably influence beyond just making some noises, the reality is that something like a LEP with public, private and voluntary sectors needs to come together, and always has in Leicestershire in my sort of 20 or 30 years. And I look down the list of people who are here, people will have been in a variety of those formats, whether they're TECs or local authority led. There will need to be something at county level that coordinates economic regeneration and strategy in the county. So it might have a different name, it might, but hopefully it will have the same energy that I've seen with this LEP board and the partnerships that currently exist. So whatever it is, I just hope that we as a county all pull together to make whatever happens in 2022 work for the county. And it will largely be based around this strategy, which has been, as you said, Kevin, linked directly to the industrial strategy 2 years ago. You know, we've all pulled together, recognising the key sectors and the potential for growth, whilst tackling many of the inequalities that exist in the city and county. And therefore, if we can all get behind this, you know, we can have a prosperous Leicestershire that extends to everybody in the county. But it just requires us to work with whichever structure is put or given to us to work with.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. Okay, I think that's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you for everybody who's put questions on and had questions responded to. If you haven't, then we'll do everything we can to make sure we cover those off. As mentioned at the start, the strategy that's presented here is not an action plan or a delivery document. They will come later with much more detail once we have further clarity from government regarding, you know, future policy and funding. As I did say, we do have a fantastic track record in this region as a LEP of transforming the region, and I really do see changes now in it becoming a knowledge technology-led economy, and we see that all around us, you know, in every part of our county. Over the past 10 years, you know, we've managed to invest over £579 million of funding into Leicester and Leicestershire economy. It's a big number, but when we add in European structural funds as well, that goes up to nearly £900 million. So we've successfully, in my view, delivered a range of transformative, you know, local and national policy initiatives, our enterprise zones, for example, and then hopefully we can further capitalise on East Midlands Freeport, which is a very exciting development for our region. The website links will give you the full economic growth strategy when it's in place, and there'll be separate documents and summaries which will be circulated and will be available through that. So please keep an eye on the website, and you'll see developments come through. In closing, just to say, it's been a very difficult 18 months, as we all know, 18 months, 2 years through the pandemic. It's been very challenging to our residents and to our businesses. But this LEP is committed to continue focus on excellence in delivery, achieving what maximum impact that we can. And we look forward to beginning to deliver the economic growth strategy to create that thriving, productive, inclusive economy for Leicester and Leicestershire. If we work together, I think we can achieve and deliver the strategy and create a very vibrant, forward-thinking and robust economy by 2030. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody for joining us. I'd like to say thank you to my panel members and for everybody involved in helping to put the strategy together. And we look forward to working with you all as partners onto the next stage. Have a good day, and please stay safe. Thank you.